I am here in the brand new 2025 Mini Cooper JCW convertible. This is the last new Mini we have yet to drive, so today is an interesting day for us. We've driven a ton of the new Minis and of course driven the hatch, the JCW hatch. So, really there's not a lot here that's new. Also driven the Cooper S in the convertible form as well. But what I haven't done, of course, is put it all together and drive this car. And so we're gonna start out. We are in somewhere outside of Savannah, Georgia, in a kind of a interesting little vacation town, and find some better roads. The one thing that you notice right away in this car is, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but how well Mini tuned the throttle mapping. It's really impressive. I've railed against sort of this dead zone that sits in a lot of these cars. So meaning that you press the accelerator and it just takes a while for something to happen. It's almost like there's processing happening, or just quite frankly, it's not as aggressive as I think a lot of people would like it to be. And so what I have in this car and what I've experienced in the previous JCW is a car that, is a little more eager. Now, of course, let's put it in sport mode. And that's when I should say go-kart mode, that's when you know you're in go-kart mode, because you've got that absolutely eye-rolling woohoo, which I don't know. I haven't met anybody who likes it, and I find it embarrassing. But anyway, you can turn it off, and we're in go-kart mode. That's what matters. And so then when you do that, the throttle mapping actually gets even more aggressive. So, in a lot of ways, this is what I've been wanting out of a Mini for a while, which is a much more immediate response. In terms of the throttle itself. It doesn't mean it's perfect, of course, but it is certainly much better. And the other thing too that's interesting here is that this is not a manual transmission. There are no manual transmissions in Minis anymore. I know that's been talked about ad nauseum, and we don't necessarily have to talk about that much more. But I will say that it is because of the immediacy of the throttle and the torque that you have down low, it's really, yes, you lose that engagement, but it is an interactive car. You feel that interactivity, you feel the responsiveness, and it takes I think a little bit away from not having that manual. At least this car feels responsive. It feels sort of immediately fun, if you will, and it should. This is, of course, this is the JCW. This is the car that really should define in a lot of ways what Mini is and can be, and it does that. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this car, and again, this is the second time I've driven the JCW in this sort of the small form, in the Cooper form, is just how much Mini clearly worked on getting this car to feel smooth, feeling not comfortable. I'm not suggesting they made this thing plush at all, but this is a car that, from the transmission shifting to, again, that throttle mapping, it's a little more aggressive, yes, but there's this inherent sort of smoothness to the entire experience. And you can sort of see in that, Mini responding to some of the criticisms that, they've had over the years, which is, listen, this car is too harsh. This car is, difficult to deal with or live with on a daily basis. And I can tell you, in my JCW Clubman, that transmission in sport mode, it gets tiring. It's a little jerky. You're doing things with that transmission that it doesn't feel like it wants to do. And with this DCT, one of the upsides is its inherent smoothness, because it's taking a gear, pre-selecting another, and swapping it, not seamlessly, but much more seamlessly than before. And so even in sport mode, even with the transmission in sport, you're getting an experience that just feels more refined, for lack of a better term. And I think that's something that a lot of folks are gonna love, coming from these older Minis, who want something that they're gonna daily, and don't necessarily want to be beat up all the time when it comes to driving. Now, there are some things that I don't love about the transmission. I think there's a little bit of also some sort of getting used to a DCT if you haven't had it before. So DCTs, of course, are an automated manual. And so when you lift your foot off the brake, you might roll back slightly at first. There's some of those tendencies that may surprise some people, but you get used to it pretty quickly. The other thing about this transmission is, of course, the shifting. And I'm right now in third. I'll shift down to second. Pretty instantaneous, not like that, but pretty instantaneous. And then again, shifting back to third, pretty instantaneous. But there are moments and scenarios where that isn't instantaneous. And like, if you were waiting a half second, or I've had to take about a second at times to make the decision to move a gear after you've clicked the paddle, you lose a little confidence in that transmission. And so there's some software refinement that could be done. But I will say, driven this car a little bit, I don't know what it is, but this feels much, transmission-wise, much more responsive than the very early JCW car I drove in very early January. So it is, I don't know if it's been improved, I don't know if it's my head, but I have not hit those moments of absolute hesitation on shifts that I did in that car. I haven't hit it yet. Pro tip, if you come to Savannah, Georgia, just be aware there's certain parts of the day where these things called no-see-ums come out, and they're tiny little bugs, and as you can imagine, you can't see them that well. And they bite. They bite very badly, and they hurt. And so I'm gonna just continue to drive. If I sit somewhere with the top down, they kind of attack. The big letdown in a lot of ways for the experience is these paddles, which are just, they feel cheap in hand. They flex a little bit, they're just plastic. I think many should have spent the money and done a sort of GP3-like 3D printed metal shift paddle that just feels cold to the touch. It feels great in your hand. And I think when you're taking away interactivity of the manual, well, let's add it back. Let's add tactile experience somewhere. And I think that's an area that they could definitely improve on. But that aside, again, it starts to feel cohesive when you consider this is a smooth shifting car. The power delivery is both, immediate but also smooth. The transitions, I know I'm driving in a straight line right now, but the transitions, through corners, again, there is a feeling of this car being honed more so than the F57, the previous generation Mini Cooper JCW convertible. There is a little bit more bracing underneath, so the car has a little bit less flex. Do I feel that? Honestly, I haven't driven the previous car in a while. I don't. I can't recall, and I should say, I don't feel, based on my memory, a dramatic difference. But these cars have always been relatively solid, or I should say relatively torsionally strong, because they're so small, of course. And even if you cut the roof off, it's not like they're wobbling all over the place. There are some changes in this generation that people have had a hard time wrapping their heads around. Design-wise, there's little things that they've done, like the single exhaust, the Veskin interior, the fabric on the dashboard. People will call that, designing to cost, or, saying the Mini is sort of cheaped out, if you will. I don't know if that's necessarily the case holistically. I think there's been some good decisions made. I think the Veskin, the synthetic leather, is better than the leather that Mini was selling in their previous cars, sans the lounge leather, which was amazing. It's a better choice. I wish I had it in my 2024 Club in JCW. The fabric dash, I honestly think it's a little bit jury's still out, because I don't know how it's going to wear, how it's going to look when it's dusty, etc. I don't mind the look, and I'm sitting in this car looking around thinking this is a nice interior, nice place to be. The problem I have are the plastics down low. Mini has decidedly taken money out of those plastics. They are hard. They're a little shinier. Do they look awful? No. But if you've seen the previous Minis, they look better in those cars. They were higher quality, sort of foam-based plastic. So the door card's kind of similar there. So I think that, if you're going to critique something, I'd say that's my spot to critique. I'd love to see Mini up their game there a little bit. I don't know if they will. If you put money into bringing a manual transmission back or other refinements on the drivetrain, I'd prefer that, because honestly, this is pretty good. The in-vehicle experience, the digital in-vehicle experience, remains the same in this car as all new Minis. So it's got Mini OS 9. There is a lot you can do with this car, but it's complex compared to where it was before, the previous generation. So it does take some up to speed. Definitely check out our video on getting the best out of OS 9, sort of the quick guide. which should be around here somewhere, and then how to use shortcuts, which is another critical factor here. Again, you'll see that video up top. Once you dial that in, once you learn how to use the OS, and then once you dial in the shortcuts you want, it becomes really second nature, like any car. So if you own it, I promise you, you will eventually figure these things out. If you don't figure them out, your dealer should be able to help you. But there's a lot of little things that Mini is hidden. They don't talk about, of course. This is why MotoringFile is always talking about this. But you know, the star button on the steering wheel, you click that, your heads-up display actually gives you those favorites, which then gets you right into what you need. So, you know, there's, again, some of those things that Mini has hidden a little bit that are very, very helpful, and I think unlock the experience a little bit. The 2025 Mini Cooper JCW convertible, it's, you know, in a sense, one of a kind, you know, given the market, and it is absolutely one of a kind in terms of the driving experience it gives you with this open top formula. The JCW adds the power and adds, I think, critically here, the torque that really changes the driving experience. There's an immediacy in the inputs in this car because of software calibration that I'll say has been missing from some Minis in the past, and I think that's a really important part of what this car delivers. You won't hear that very often, but I think that's really, I think, one of the big wins in my book. And then finally, it's the design, it's the style. This is a Mini. This is a unique look. This is a unique experience, owning, driving, being seen in it, of course, as I drive around Savannah, and it's hard to beat. If you haven't subscribed to MotoringFile, please subscribe. We have a lot more videos, and give us a like. We really appreciate it.